Welcome back. Now, in the previous video, we have finished binding one of our text elements on our HUD to firing the weapon. And so as we fire the weapon and we use a round, then that ammo count goes down. But you might have noticed now that our flash particles and also the beam start location is no longer at the start of our weapon barrel, but it's up here at some strange location. Now, if you were puzzled as to why that's happening all of a sudden, think about our barrel location. It should be at the end of the barrel of the gun, right? Well, the thing is, we are not using our character's mesh anymore. Our gun is now its own mesh. And so, if we hop back into Visual Studio, we'll see here in Fire Weapon, we're getting Barrel Socket. Now, it's a const use skeletal mesh socket called Barrel Socket, and we're getting it using get mesh and then get socket by name. But this mesh here is our character mesh. It's not actually the mesh that contains the weapon we're using. We now have our own weapon class and we've spawned that and attached it to our mesh. So we don't actually want the mesh of our character, we want the mesh of our equipped weapon. So what we're going to do here in Fire Weapon is we're going to first check to see if we even have an equipped weapon. So we're going to say if equipped weapon, if that's equal to null, null pointer, we can just return because we don't need to fire any weapon. We don't have one to fire. After that, anything we do with equipped weapon will not risk accessing a null pointer because we won't even be in the function anymore if equipped weapon is null. Now remember, equipped weapon is an A weapon which derives from our A item class. And if we go down to the bottom of A item.h in our public section, you'll see that we've created a get item mesh function. This returns the mesh of our item. So weapon inherits that. So in Fire Weapon, we want to use that get item mesh on our equipped weapon. So instead of calling get mesh, we're going to call equipped weapon get item mesh. And from get item mesh, then we can call get socket by name. So that's the mesh we need to use. Now also, when we're getting our socket transform, we also need to use the same mesh because when we call get socket transform from our barrel socket, we need to pass in a mesh, and of course we need to pass in the equipped weapons item mesh. So equipped weapon get item mesh, that's what we need to pass in there. So now let's go ahead and compile this. Now, if you're using the asset that is just the weapon, that is not Bellica's entire skeletal mesh, but the weapon skeletal mesh that you downloaded from the GitHub page, then you're going to want to make sure that barrel socket exists on this skeletal mesh. So just like when we added the barrel socket to Bellica's skeletal mesh, we need to add one to this one. So go ahead and select the weapon bone here in the skeleton and right click and add socket. And we're going to rename this socket barrel socket. Now we need to position barrel socket so that it's at the barrel tip. So let's move to translate mode and move this out and up so that it's right here at the barrel tip. So I'm going to put it right about there, and I'm going to go into rotate mode and rotate this by 90 degrees so that way the x-axis is pointing forward. So now our weapon itself has a barrel socket. And back in the editor, we can hit play, and now we see our particles starting off in the correct location at the socket location of our equipped weapon mesh rather than our character mesh. See you in the next video.